She goes.
Okay,
Sorry.
going to call the
want one?
Roseville Airport Commerce Park Commission to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Rathel, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 2 is roll call. Mr. Moran is here. Mr. Rathel?
Here.
Mr. Posarelli is not here yet. Mr. Tenova?
Here.
Mr. Mans?
Here.
Mr. Hornby?
Here.
Mr. Filarski?
Here.
The third item on the agenda is, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Motion by Mr. Rathel,
Support.
support by Mr. Filarski. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 4 is a motion to approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 19th, 21. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read them. Is there any changes? Motion by Mr. Mans,
Support.
support by Mr. Tenova to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of 4/19/21. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 5 is the financial report for May 2021. And everyone should have their financial report as part of their packet. We are just starting, we are through 17% of our fiscal year. We have a budgeted amount of $978,581. Our year-to-date revenue is $168,409, which equals 17% of our budget. Our expenditures for the year are budgeted at $978,581, and our expenditures and encumbrances year-to-date is $141,276, which equals 14% of our budgeted expenditures. Our past due rent summary is a total of $15,744. And our capital reserves as of May 31st is $503,116. With that, Mike, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few things to add. The fuel inventory, I didn't get that. We were getting the load in, or split load in that day, so we're kind of recalibrating a few things. Current fuel inventory for our jet fuel tanks, value-wise, is $13,303, and our 100 octane, our 100 LL, is $29,442. We continue to try to split those as much as we can with nearby airports to reduce that transportation and other fixed cost, and keep those prices low for our tenants. The past due rent summary has still had a lot of movement in it. The Bowman one has been, that dollar amount past due has been caught up. Lattice is significantly less than last meeting. That number last meeting was over $8,000. We received a payment of $6,000 in bulk. We did file some paperwork against that tenant and received the payment about 3 days after that. And we're on a plan to receive that in, past due amount in full by the 1st of next month. The other big offender on there is Sideline. This one is a very long-term tenant. I believe has been here since the Navy left. So like we're talking 1970. Trying to work with the tenant. Same thing, we offered some COVID assistance there. The tenant didn't take it, but then started falling behind. Tenant had to go out of town for a extended period of time with some family matters. Working with them, they dropped off a check for half today, and I'm told we'll get the other half Wednesday. They had to wait for some other funds to clear. I'm pretty confident we'll get that. I tried to be patient with that tenant again. Very long-term tenant and family on the airfield. The other one that's a little larger on there is D-Ball. We did provide assistance, COVID assistance, 3 months there. That's supposed to be caught up by now, so that tenant hasn't fallen any more behind, but hasn't started to catch up on those payments. So that's a discussion that I'll be having with him this week on starting to make payments back towards that 3-month abatement that we provided. That's all I have.
Mike, the list of the expired leases that we need to renew, where do those stand?
Talking on the,
Stanley, Sideline Land, Sideline Building, Elder Care, and Campu Brothers.
so I know we discussed at the one meeting, Stanley and Sideline have been on there for 5 or 6 years now. The initial lease term has expired. We hold current leases with them. It reverts back to a month to month. It's been, I actually longer than that, I'm sorry, I inherited that way when I came into this position. So we're talking over 8 years. Those ones I've left. Elder Care is an office one that needs to get renewed. Campo Brothers has 2 units with us, so I was going to try to renew those together. But all of those are under a current lease in terms of our legal agreements. They're just a month-to-month rolling, so those do need to get Elder Care and Campo on that list. I would say are the ones that need to get renewed.
Any questions for Mike?
Just one. How about the $2,000 T-hanger account that's passed to?
The Deacon, that one we're getting there on legal issue too. I've run probably behind on them a half a dozen times, and they come in and pay in full. So I think that's more of a neglect and omit error, but when pressure is applied, it generally is. I may take a different tactic with that account. Our T-hangers have been full now for a year and a half. So I mean, it's a good time to say we need good paying tenants. Again, we try to be a little more flexible during COVID times, but when the demand is there, I'd like to see, good standing tenants when we can get them.
And with it being a T-hanger, it takes a little bit longer to get to $2,000,
Correct.
so that's why I was wondering.
Any other comments or questions on the financial report? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to receive and file.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Filarski. Support by Mr. Mans. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 6 is a manager's report. Item 6A is the EPA complex update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief update here. Mr. Hornby, I guess you could fill in anything I missed, or if you have any additional info you want to provide just from your professional background. This is a flyer provided by a broker that EPA or GSA, I'm sorry, has retained for marketing for the EPA complex over there. So this is kind of their teaser ad that they provided to us. You're going to see the auction start date is Tuesday, June 8th. What is kind of confusing here is they're providing tours of the facility after the auction start date on June 24th and July 5th. Unfortunately, I don't have any control over that. I don't know why they're doing it in that fashion. Generally, I think you would want to do a tour of the facility before the bids take place. So this is just what I've gotten from them. I do know I've had some questions from a few interested developers. We've been trying to provide, the township and myself have been trying to provide data or drawings or any kind of support resources that we can in the background there that they might not be getting from GSA. So just want to provide you guys with that update. I don't know if Greg has any more comments you want to fill in or...
Yeah, just that they, they're going to run the auction about a month through July with, I'm not sure the termination dates, so it is a little unusual from most auctions, but that's really about it.
Mike, have you heard of anybody that has interest?
Yeah, I've spoken to a few. Like I said, initially, at the beginning of COVID, we were trying to, from the airport perspective, look at the property and entertain some developers that would potentially partner with us. I think kind of the beginning of COVID was a tough time to do that. I had, and I think some of the commission has had some frustrations with the GSA because we were told that the auction, we told them we were having some issues with finding developers, but then they told us the auction was postponed with COVID. They were just going to kind of delay everything. When they restarted that process, they basically notified me that they were going straight into auction and our time had passed. So it kind of put the stop on any of our efforts. But, again, from a township standpoint, I think the township's still trying to find, a developer that could be interested. I think one of the commission, my and township's biggest fears would be to, see a speculator buy that and have nothing come of the property. So I would say there's some qualified individuals and businesses or developers that have expressed interest. Whether that's going to come to fruition with anything, I do not know.
Thanks, Mike. Any comments or questions? Mr. Mr. Mans?
How does the property tax work on that? So that, I mean, how do you?
So two interesting issues. Any potential developers should really be talking to the township. That facility has never been taxed. I mean, since the Navy took over, and then it was an EPA complex. So that property has always been tax exempt, and that property as a federal entity has also been zoning exempt. So both of those, it reverts to Airport A1, which is within our bounds. But then, yeah, it needs to get assessed and taxed. So that's something that obviously we'd like to see a developer work with the township on and, have a good relationship there.
Anything else for Mike? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6B, which is the runway 1735 update. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You guys should have in your packet kind of a good memo that we've put together to MDOT and FAA. As you guys are all aware from my communications last week, this is an ongoing issue that the commission and I have been dealing with since I've arrived here and the previous manager. So the commission's been dealing with this for over 10 years. The time has come to close runway 1735 based on a recommendation of MDOT Aeronautics. We received that recommendation from one of their safety inspectors. And from a liability standpoint, I don't think it leaves us much choice of what to do with that. Obviously, given the recommendation now, the Airport Advisory Committee and I met, and we think there's some things we can do to explore the possibilities of reopening it, whether it's a more restricted use, a shorter distance of the runway. There's definitely some opportunities to explore. But this memo is really the final step, or I guess I should say chance, for 1735. To remind the commission, we were looking at the deterioration in 1735 in 2013 with a pavement condition study that was funded by MDOT. We spent, through a grant, we spent $50,000 to investigate our pavement problems on that runway and our taxiway that we're looking to redo next summer. It came back that we have the chemical reaction, we have multiple other issues with the runway that's causing a significantly premature deterioration. But when we were done with that investigation, we started seeing the same problems on our primary runway, 422, which was a significant concern to us. That's when we spent a lot of time working with the FAA and getting that grant that we got for $6 million to fully reconstruct that runway and save it. So I think, if we didn't have the same problems with our primary runway, this runway probably would have already been reconstructed and we wouldn't be sitting here today. It's really unfortunate that we got into a position where both of our runways were failing from conditions that are outside of our control. But unfortunately, this memo is really the last chance that we have to justify funding for that runway. So I know the commission and I worked on this well over a year ago. MDOT asked for a couple of modifications that were very minor. I worked with the engineer to get those, and it's been resubmitted, but sitting with MDOT Aeronautics for probably the last 6 months. So the committee made a recommendation essentially to utilize all resources possible to expedite this justification process with MDOT Aeronautics any way that we can.
Open it up for any comments, questions?
Well,
Mr. Filarski.
if I can, yeah. So I was part of the discussion with the advisory commission, and personally, I think we really do have to push and explore every avenue to try to keep this runway open. In the short term, I'm afraid that once it's closed down, that it's just going to get more and more difficult to keep it going. Mark and I, Mark Lovis from the advisory commission, and I took a drive down it, and it looks like it's the first third of runway 17 that's basically failing. So I think the runway could still be operational at a shorter distance if we displace the runway threshold. So, that was one thing I'd like to explore. I'd like to press MDOT a little bit more and get more specific reasons of what it is that's actually failing. Are there these things that could be addressed on a smaller scale to keep it open? Because it just kind of seems like they painted it with a broad brush. The pavement, all of a sudden it's failed, done. So is this the case, or are there some small repairs that we can keep this thing going a little bit longer? Now, we put a lot of money into the other side of Grow Road, and you know, for development of this airport going forward in the future, I think that this other runway makes us more viable. It gives us more capacity. It makes the airport a safer airport. And there's a lot of things I'd like to see over here. You know, I'd like to see avionics shop or a mechanical shop or some of these things, you know, to, you know, grow both sides of the road. I'd like to see the airport actually generating more revenue on its own and not being fully reliant on, you know, the leasing operations of everything else. So I think, you know, that being said, you know, I would like more clarification as far as, you know, what can be done to maintain it, keep it open, and, you know, see what we can do to, you know, get the funding to replace it. And one of the other things, you know, I don't want to go on too long, but one of the other things we talked about was, you know, the viability of the runway. So I think that, well, I'll just go ahead and I'll stop right there. You know, I don't want to go you know, too much more.
So Mike,
Yeah,
what,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
what needs to happen in order for,
So
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish that.
what improvements need to happen at a minimum to have it operational?
None of that was laid out by MDOT Aeronautics on their recommendation, but some of the history, part of the issue is, you know, we have this study from 2013 that we've paid for. Part of that recommendation, basically for repairs, was you cannot take out as little of the damaged pavement as possible, fix it in asphalt or the cheapest material that you can, because whatever you do is probably not going to last long. To read between the lines, that's what the report says. Take out as minimal as you can. The cheapest material we can is asphalt. So the state saw that. They started giving us $30,000 a year that I negotiated for to maintain this runway. We spent that almost every year that we had it, and then some of our budget on top of that. So there were years, but it also varied in the last few years. I will say that there were years we spent $45,000. There was the next year we might have spent $8,000. But we continued down the path where that maintenance money probably wasn't enough. But the debate was, I guess I'll continue on. Last year, MDOT came to us and said, listen, we've been giving you $30,000 a year for the last 5 years. The pavement's continuing to deteriorate. We have this report. You know, this is the last year we're going to give you funding because it's gotten to a condition where we don't see the benefit of throwing, you know, our funds behind it to maintain it, right? So the debate is how much good money are we going to throw after bad and for how long? And MDOT pulled that plug last year for us. So now the question is, does the Commissioner Airport and Commerce Park want to pick up and start investing in that, and to what extent is the challenge, right? I don't have all those answers. I mean, I think we could easily spend $30,000 right now and still not be able to be open. I don't have estimates for all that, but there is significant deterioration that's determined by a safety inspector. So it's not, I wouldn't say that it failed all of a sudden. I mean, this has been going on for 10 years, and it's kind of that slow buildup that's led us here. But no, I do not have specifics from the safety inspector of if you clean the stone off, if you patch these 10 areas and remark the entire runway to have a shortened threshold, you know, we could do that. I don't have that. I mean, we just got the recommendation last week, so obviously that's kind of what the committee and I were talking about. How do we explore that and move forward? And I think this is the memo and submittal to MDOT and FAA is, you know, how do we fix this long term? Right now we're discussing of what do we do in the short term, medium term. So that's kind of that debate. I mean, I don't have the answers on that. It's definitely something a conversation that needs to be had.
Can't we find out what it will take for short-term and long-term?
Sure. We have the long-term answer. I mean, the long-term answer is a complete and entire reconstruction of that runway, just like we did to our primary runway. The last estimate, pre-COVID, pre-bridge issues, which if we got funding, be after the bridge was reopened. But regardless, the last estimate we had was around $5 million.
And how much of that would our responsibility be typically?
So this letter tries to justify making that runway eligible for a grant. Right now we're responsible for 100%. If they accept this and say, you're right, if we can get a grant, it'll be 5%. But the debate is, again, we were able to convince the FAA, hey, look, we have this severe issue now in our primary runway. We did everything we were supposed to do. We built this to your design specifications, and it failed us. You know, you guys told us how we had to do it, where it had to be done. We did it, and it failed. So we convinced them to redo 422, right? So now the conversation is kind of shifted of, listen, we've given you runway or money funds for your primary runway. Your secondary isn't a true crosswind runway. We don't think it's eligible for funding. So it's kind of, they have other, in their mind, they have other more important statewide, nationwide projects to fund, and they just gave us $6 million for our primary. So there's a little bit of jockeying going on there in the background as well as of this justification. But some of that argument can be also had in here. You'll see it towards the end of the letter. We talk about, you know, you guys have given us millions of dollars over the last 10 or 15 years to maintain this as a runway. So you've been telling us through grant and funds that you think this should be a runway. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given us millions of dollars over, you know, the last 15 to 20 years to do that. So why now all of a sudden shouldn't it be a runway? I mean, the argument can be switched to them as well, and that's part of that justification in this memo.
Jim, just one more comment.
Sure, go ahead, Darryl.
So, I mean, I think our chances of getting funding are probably as good as they're going to be with the infrastructure program that's coming out. And some of the things that we talked about in the advisory commission meeting too were some of the things that, you know, what makes this airport unique to other airports. And, you know, I think, you know, part of the justification, you know, in building the case for maintaining this is this airport is part of our history. And the second thing is we're an island. You know, we've got 2 bridges. We're down to 1 bridge, which is susceptible. So, you know, I think those are, you know, items, you know, to focus on as far as building a case.
Mr. Rathel.
So there's a couple things at play here that we have to understand. And we don't know a lot. We don't know anything other than we got a communication that Mike just outlined. We don't know if that was put together by one person. Was it a new person? Was it a committee? Was it part of an overall geographical regional plan or national plan of aviation monies? We don't know any of that. We don't know if this could fit into a short-term solution of keeping it going, or if there's a long-term solution. Quite honestly, I don't think the FAA and MDOT Aviation knows either. This is something that is very fluid, and in these situations, it's easy for somebody just to write that letter and be done with it. So we need to find that out. The important thing for us that what we can do is really understand why we want it, why we need it, what is the reason. And it's very difficult at the airport, and this group, when we got together many years ago, we took the position that we would manage in perpetuity. We would manage for the future. We would take our assets and we'd keep them so that one day they could be developed and we wouldn't lose them. And there's example after example after example. The biggest one recently was the east side of this hangar. We spent $250,000 roughly to keep it, you know, boxed in and taken care of. We ended up getting a tenant. We made all that money back, and we made a profit. And now we have a facility that one day we're going to lease again, right? That was revenue. The runway, if we look at it today, in today's environment of coming off of COVID and aviation on Grosjean, and look, it could be very easy to just, oh well, that's it. Darn, we'd like it. But it's more than that, because what we've always done here in every decision is maintain our revenue source to maintain the airport. Because without the airport, we don't have a commerce park. We have a commerce park to maintain the airport. We are only one of 3 airports in the state of Michigan that is self-sustained by not taking taxpayer revenues. We do it by that, for that. If you look at what's going on in aviation, aviation is projected, private aviation, recreational aviation is projected to grow and continue to grow throughout North America of 2+% year over year for the next 5 years. You go regionally to a place like Tennessee, not where Gary's from there, Lebanon, at his airport, it's crazy aviation. It's exploding, okay? And that aviation has put monies back in the community. It's been an unbelievable asset for the community. They have all kinds of things at their airport for the community like we have here. If we start looking at the aviation side of not as important of saving as we do the commercial side, then we're at risk all the time of really not having anything as far as aviation other than a few planes that are going up and down here. That's not what this facility is for with the community. If we get rid of it, what's going to happen to that? We still have to maintain it. We still have to cut it. We still have to spend money on it. We still have to provide the visual aesthetics of the facility. We just can't let all that go. We have to monitor it. There's no planes. We got big X's, and all of a sudden we have trouble every once in a while now with flipping fast cars driving, you know, on the ramps and everything. So whether or not we can spend $8 million or $10 million, we can't. We need a grant. We all, I think, would agree with that. But if we don't look and understand that it's important to us as a community, as what we do down here, to keep that available for the future of this facility. Next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and we lose it, we're never, ever going to get it back. Never going to get it back. So we need to find out, in my opinion, what is MDOT and FAA saying. Quite honestly, on 0422, when they came back here and they were talking about what they wanted to do and what we couldn't do and this and that and blah, 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 I went down with Mike. We met with the FAA director and the guy there. He sat down there, and all the other people at the table were going, no, can't do that. This guy goes, ah, we're doing it. Grozil, you can do this. One guy changed everything that we were told we couldn't do. So we need to find out what the real issue is with FAA and MDOT. We need to find out what we can do to maintain it at another year level or a 3-year plan or whatever, and how much that would cost, okay? And move down the road here, coming to the ultimate solution of redoing that runway. As far as how it fits in the community, that runway fits beautifully in the community. It's amazing. We have, for many years, up until not too many years ago, and keep in mind, we have every T-hangar full. We have no T-hangars available. They're all full of planes. When aviation on Grozil was exploding not too many years ago, before the Great Recession, we had planes flying and landing on both runways. And we still had Island Fest, we still had Michigan Jets, we still had all the activity that we have now. We had the Memorial Garden, we had everything, the soccer tournaments and everything, and it fit very well in the community. So having that runway is not going to burden the community or make us renege on our community pledge of being good neighbors and citizens to the people of Grosse Ile. So myself personally, once Mike, if you can find out what this really means, I have no problem going down there and talking to them about it. They've been giving us millions of dollars for this.
Yep.
But I have no problem if Mike comes back and says, well, you know, there's no long-term solution, there's maybe a little short-term solution. I have no problem saying, Mike, how much would it be for us to maintain that in a short-term solution for the next year? Is it $30,000? What is it? And I would have no problem going, I'm okay with spending that money. We've been working our tails off on all these other facilities over there, generating more revenue than we ever have in this facility. For what? To do more facilities over there? No, we do it for one reason, here. And if we lose sight of that, you wanna know something? Let's just take this commission, we'll say, you guys are in charge of the north side of Grove Road, you're the Commerce Park, and we'll get the airport commission back. So we have to do everything we can for the future of this facility of Grosse Ile. We owe it to everything that we've done to make sure that we do everything we can to maintain that and not lose it. And somebody said it, I think you said it. The longer it's closed, the harder it's gonna be to get open.
Sure.
We could like go here through the whole summer and just trying to figure out what's going on, and all of a sudden, you know, now we're into a situation where, well, you know, the asphalt plants are closed now. Well, you know, let's just keep it closed for the winter. We gotta do it now. To me, out of all the things that we've done, Commerce Park is taking care of itself. You guys were rock stars, man. You wanna know something? Congratulations. Those things are working. We got new developments. To me, the single most important thing, in my mind, as a member of this commission, is to make sure we keep that 1735 operational for as long as we can until smart people all sit here one day and go, man, we tried, man. We did everything we could. But until then, to me, that's the most important thing.
Mr. Chair, if I may add one comment as well. A lot of frustrations I have with this situation, I have some of it documented, but I mean, I can think back at least 5 years ago. As this runway deteriorated, I would ask FAA, MDOT, what is the process? How do we do, who gets to determine who gets to make the call? And that has changed pretty much every time I've asked. Based on history, MDOT basically recommended or commanded us to close the runway to jet and turbine traffic. This is now MDOT. That, in my mind, that's MDOT making the decision. I emailed MDOT and FAA. I said, what's the procedure? There isn't one. Okay, how are we going to handle this? Got no response. So who gets to determine that? 2 years ago, I got told by MDOT, well, it's up to you, you know. And we had a lot of debate on that, and I felt like I settled it at, look, if there's ever an immediate concern, I'm not trying to put liability on the state, but this needs to be a group decision. If there's an immediate concern, yeah, if we have a pavement heave over there and there's a 1 foot hump in the middle of the runway, absolutely, that's my concern and where I need, you know, my jurisdiction, I feel like. But how do we decide when the runway comes to the end of its life or when it should be closed? I was constantly trying to get clarification from that and never received it. I mean, I think I asked over a dozen times. And then we have a new MDOT inspector, you know, first year, it's new supervisor, but still first year job, show up, runway's closed. Now, again, I can argue that some of this has been going on for a very long time and we have recommendations that show it in that window. But the flip side is, you know, we all of a sudden had no clear path and now it's closed. So I would have liked to have seen this process be a little more diplomatic, have a few meetings, look, it's continuing to deteriorate, you know, next year could be the last year, here's what we think, here's how we handle it, here's what we need from you. The path is, with a lot of federal entities, sometimes very unclear, so we're trying to navigate it as best we can, but that's definitely some of the frustrations I've had along the way is, you know, there hasn't been do X, Y, and Z. It's go talk to this person, you go talk to the FAA, get this from MDOT, so we're we're definitely trying to work it from every angle we can, but I agree. I think reaching out to MDOT and FAA together and saying we need a very specific list of why the runway's closed, what can we do to get back open, and where is our justification letter at, because you guys have been sitting on it for a long time. I mean, that's a lot of the frustrations that I have.
So I want to say two things on that. So if you look at the way that FAA, we have our PAPIs. PAPIs?
Sure.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
On 0422, right?
Yep.
We've had every engineer that you can possibly imagine come out and try to line those things up, and they're tweaking them, and what these are lights that are red if you're not in the right. I'm not a pilot. So
Red if you're
So-
too low, and white if
so
you're too high, and
it's
red and
like,
white if you're
you know,
good.
Is it this or is it that, and blah blah blah, and you got to like shield them off, right, so that they're only in the flight path. We had countless amount of consultants come out, tweak those things. FAA comes over, flies over Round Island, basically heading east, and goes, nope, I saw the light. There's a song in that, but it wasn't the light of the Pappy, okay? So that one guy, no. And now here we have the Pappies that we put money in when we did this, and all the monies that we spent, okay? One guy, no. All right? Over here, one person, okay, shows up that doesn't land on the runway, doesn't have, probably knows less about aviation than I do. I'm only assuming that.
I'll disagree with that, but continue.
Okay. But I talk to the guys that land on it, like the pilots. I go over there and say, hey, what's going on with 1735? Yeah, it's, you know, we need a new runway. Well, if I ever talk to a pilot that didn't say they needed a new runway, he's probably checking out. He's not going to be a pilot anymore, because they always want new runways. But I said, could you land on it? Yeah. Is it dangerous? Well, I mean, I've landed on a lot worse. Landed on one a lot worse just 2 days ago. Would you land on it? Yeah. So what do you do? Well, the student pilots go over there. Oh, you land on it with a student pilot? Yeah, it's a better runway for them. Aren't you afraid they're going to fall into a hole? Or, I mean, it's like, no. So is it bad? Yeah, it's bad. Need a new runway? Yeah, we need a new runway. Would you land on it? Yeah. So you want to know something? Everybody that uses it doesn't have a problem with it, but one person shows up and says, done. I have a problem with that.
Mike, do those people come here and inspect it?
Sure. Yeah, it's an MDOT aeronautics inspector, and to defend the individual a little bit, I would say he's qualified to make the choice. Previously was in operations management at Wayne County Airport Authority. So I'm not saying he has no knowledge, but the one.
So Wayne County, so he's dealing with commercial jets at not, you know. Do you know that we have actually a grass runway right next to that people can land on? Didn't know that, right? When we redid 1735, they put a grass strip right next to it.
There was a design for that. I wasn't aware that actually got done.
Grass.
So when you meet with them, Mike, do they come here? Do you have to go there?
No, they come.
What more do you
They come here.
Yeah, the inspection, the new inspector, I will say, previous inspections lasted about 4 hours. This inspector was here for over 7. So it was a little longer than I was used to, but no, they come on site and we did a full walk of the runway, spent a lot of time on it. I would say more than half our day was spent on the runway. I wouldn't say it was someone who just drove down and looked at it. I did request they had 2 new inspectors. I had an issue with one last year. I asked that the supervisor come down this year, and I asked that he do a very good review of the file and the history of the runway. Whether that was done or not, I don't know. But we did spend a full day together on the runway. I would say, developing a relationship with the person seemed like a reasonable individual, but obviously $4,000 to bring the waterproofing from the existing east wall onto the south. We came approximately 200 feet down the south wall. Haven't had any other issues since that, so just want to make the commission aware there. That was kind of a emergency expense, obviously a little over budget, but Compo generally gives us good prices and is a local partner, so we moved call it frustrating leaks in the barrel roof, smaller ones that I'm trying to work through. It's mostly where the new roofs are tying into that and kind of the joints flexing. None have been, I mean, we're talking, some of the larger ones, maybe like a 2-foot diameter. We saw last night, when you get, there's 3, I'm going to see if we can have them redesigned or re-engineered. There's 3 ridge vents, metal ridge vents on the top of that roof. When it blows 50 mile an hour, out of the south and rains and drives rain into those holes, it comes into that vent and comes down to the court. There's, it's such a large roof that we're chasing a couple small things. So it's definitely a concern moving forward. I mean, that's one of our larger capital improvements we're looking at down the road. I'd like to get it through the summer. If we continue to have issues, I may have like a roofing engineer or somebody look at that and give us a recommendation to see if there's anything we can do short, medium term. But obviously that's going to be next year or two, kind of one of our larger capital improvements to look at. So trying to chase a few things there. Like I said, that I think we had like four smaller leaks today. 3 of them would have been those roof vents. So there's one that's up on the barrel. We need to wait till it's dry for a contractor. But like I said, we were pretty quick to suck that up off the court that was flooded. It was just that southeast exercise room. One of the tennis courts had some slight flooding on it, but I'd say within 2 hours of noticing, most of the water was gone and the fans were there drying. So I would say a minor interruption in the morning, but nothing past that.
Anything else for Mike? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is the item 6D, which is the food truck ordinance. As we all know, there was an ordinance that went into effect earlier this year. And Mike, do you want to give us an update? Give us a little history of the ordinance and how it was approved.
Sure. I think it was the township supervisor board started receiving some complaints regarding food trucks. I think before Galindo's was even operating the Commerce Park, from restaurants, and I don't know the full extent of who else, but there were some concerns about food trucks becoming basically uncontrollable or competitive to restaurants in the island, hurting some business. We at the commission and I had discussed at the beginning of COVID, it seemed like there was a demand for at least one food truck. Our tenant, who is also a local resident, Galindo's, had requested to operate one in the Commerce Park. I had discussed it with the commission. We decided to allow it during COVID because we saw the demand and the want there for our residents and tried to provide them another alternative option for meals. There were more concerns brought up, and really it was just a lot of confusion on DDA would want food trucks for specific events for owners on Macomb Street. There were special events that would require or request to have them, and there really was no ordinance addressing that. So the supervisor asked the DPW manager, myself, to try to participate in that. This really kind of came out of more the supervisor and the DPW manager. This is the food truck that they worked with the planning professional on that the township has. So this is what they've come up with. I think it allows for 3 food trucks in up to 3 mobile food vendors in the Commerce Park property, and then it also has a fee schedule on there that still needs to get approved by the township board.
And it's my understanding that Glendos now is going to open a brick and mortar on Macomb, so the need for that may go away.
Correct. Yeah, Galindo's has purchased the prior Tasty Freeze property. They told me, so it looks like they'll be moving into a brick and mortar location, and they've told me once that's complete, once the build out there is complete, they'll be removing the food truck from the Commerce Park.
And do we know of any other food trucks that are?
Auburn Cafes expressed some interest. I don't know what their appetite is for the fee schedule that's in here or the requirements. I have not heard from them otherwise, but I would say during 2 months ago they had expressed some interest or asked what was needed. At that time I had told them they needed to wait till this was kind of completed, so we had some clarification.
But there is a current fee schedule that's being...
Correct, even though it still needs to get approved by the township board and formalized, but it is still being enforced.
And what is that fee schedule?
I believe it's $300, and the ordinance here would clarifies that half would go to the Airport Commerce Park and the other half goes to the township.
It's annually, right?
Monthly.
Anyone have any questions on the ordinance? Mr. Mans?
I'm a little confused, Mike, because it doesn't seem like we're getting much benefit out of this. How much time are you spending on this if the township board is making all the decisions?
Initially, I was spending, I would say I was involved a fair amount. Towards the end, when it's kind of the pen started going to paper, I'm more removed from the establishment of this. I did not have input in the fee schedule.
Why are we even discussing this anymore? It seems like it's been taken out of our hands.
I think the only discussion is an update, so everybody knows, you know, what the ordinance is and what the fee schedule is.
Gotcha.
And, you know, do we put much more effort in trying to
I guess that's my point.
attract a food truck to the Commerce Park if we're not getting much benefit for it? So,
Right, I think that's the question to be posed is, this has been developed, how do we want to implement that? Do we want to do an investment into the Commerce Park to accommodate these? Obviously, there's a lot of revenue to, you know, match an investment of that type to accommodate them. Do we want to designate an area? Do we want to try to establish a lease that goes on top of that for our area? And how much do we think we can get out of that if we want to do it? You know, or is that just not worthwhile and we want to move on? That's kind of the question to the commission, I guess, but I wanted to bring it up as an update to make you guys aware of where that's at.
I'd say until we know whether there's a demand for it, why spend time trying to tweak it if there's no demand for it? Mr. Nova?
Mike, is there any other, like around the other cities, what the fee structures are? I'm curious.
The DDA director, mostly her, and a little bit of assistance from me at the beginning of this process, pulled downriver communities, nearby communities for reference. I think we found the highest one to be around 300 for the year for that permit. Most of the time, the municipalities that we surveyed were doing a smaller fee, whether it's monthly or an annual. A lot of them were annual or biannual, shorter frequency, and they were more just, it was more of a processing fee to make sure that you had insurance and the proper state licensing to be selling food.
So 300 per year?
Correct. That was the highest that we saw. I mean, the lowest I think was like, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I want to say like around $40 for the year. Most of them were a one-time administration fee for checking the legal documentation that the truck is safe to be involved in operating with the community. And then, you know, then generally the real estate owner would make the profit off of allowing the truck to operate. Whether it's at a gas station, you know, they get, then the owner is collecting that fee.
Yeah, so further to Mr. Mann's point, we shouldn't waste any more time on this or try to generate more business here, because they could easily go to another downriver community and park a food truck and pay $40 a month.
A year.
Yeah, a year.
A year.
A year.
I thought it was 300 a year, was the highest.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you said $40 a month. It could go somewhere else for $40.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. Math major.
The only, I guess the only comment I'll make, the only other time we may see some interest would be like if the rest of the COVID restrictions are lifted and we see like a peak soccer game season or something, you may have a food truck that wants to come for a month window or something. But I think it would be a challenge to get some year round. I may be wrong.
Sure. Mr. Filarski?
So question, so somebody wants to have a new food truck on Groseal, what would the request look like? Would they go to the township then and request to have a food truck, and then the township would tell us that we're putting it on the airport property?
So the ordinance lays out either the DDA can have one, it needs to be a DDA sponsored event. If they wanted to park one in the Airport Commerce Park, the ordinance actually says that they have to have approval from the airport manager. So they'd have to meet with me first. They couldn't just show up and park a food truck there. It hasn't been clear to me whether that's a letter, an email. That process hasn't been, I guess, worked out yet. But then there would be the check for the fee. Proof of insurance, the only other one that wasn't clear to me in there was cooking methods and a menu. I don't know if the clerk is the one that's going to be reviewing downstairs. The clerk's office is reviewing for the permits. So I think they need some more background to implement that. But no, this does require, I forget what section it is, but it does normally require approval by me. For the DDA stuff, it requires approval by the DDA director as well, which I think currently is Chairman Moran.
Vacant. No. It's a vacant position right now.
So then, Mike, what you just said kind of confused me a little bit. Who collects the money then? With the $300 a month?
The clerk's office would be, and then half would get submitted to the Airport Commerce Park somewhere.
So, is there anything in the ordinance, can you do just 1 month? Can you just say, I just want a food truck for 1 month?
Yeah. The permitting period, they set it up so the permitting period is an individual calendar month. That's on the second page.
And then is it up to the clerk's office to collect every month after that if they continue to,
Correct. So the food truck would have to come back every month, re-show the documentation, redo the payment.
or, I mean, they could pay it for 6 months at one time if they wanted, I'm assuming?
This requires it to come in every month. Yep.
Well, I think that the only thing that people have been a little, and they brought up a little interested in is that whatever their process is, it's not our process, and I don't know if the commission really wants you to spend any time on this. It doesn't, if they go down to the clerk's office and they pay $300 and now they call you, how are you going to not approve? What are you gonna do? You can say no? I mean, it's just.
You could.
So page 4,
They
page
could put it somewhere
4,
else. They
part
might talk
C
about doing
says,
the whole thing.
permitted to operate within the Airport Commerce Park as authorized by the Airport Commerce Park manager. So, yes, it currently comes to me, they need my sign off before completing that process is my understanding.
And that's more to deal with the location where they're gonna be, I'm assuming.
I don't know. I would assume.
For the record, can you say words when you just, instead of like that look?
Sorry.
Is that a yes
I am
or a no
unsure.
that you said? I don't know what the, oh, you're not sure.
I'm unsure.
Okay.
Well, if we start to get more activity, let us know, Mike.
Understood.
There's no other comments on that item. We'll move on to our action items, which is item number 7. We have an office lease, and we have a recommendation or a resolution before us that reads, based upon the recommendation from the Groseal Airport Commerce Park manager, the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission hereby approves a lease between David Wolf, D.O., and the Groseal Municipal Airport. A formal lease will be developed pending approval by the commission. Terms of the proposed lease agreement are listed in the history, purpose, and explanation section of this resolution, and it is for a 1-year lease for an amount of $204.21 a month, which equals $2,450.50 for the year, and it equals $13 a square foot.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Rathel,
Support.
support by Mr. Hornby. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Rathel.
where is this office at, Mike? Which one is it specifically?
It's first floor. This tenant needed an ADA accessible office. This is south side, first floor, western lower. It's a first floor unit on the kind of more the west side, right next to the flight school.
Okay.
It was a photography studio that the tenant outgrew and moved out of, so we swapped. The son-in-law of this tenant actually has an upstairs studio next to our attorney. So,
Any other questions? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Rathel, supported by Mr. Hornby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item is item 7B, which is the Army Corps RAB Establishment Support. Mike.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I know Liaison Porcerelli had this. He was hoping to have this on the next township board meeting for support. I've been in contact with him. He said he was not able to make it tonight. I don't have any material for that. I can try to provide some background. I know I don't know how you want to handle this, Mr. Chair. I know Mr. Heil has been involved also from the public side of establishing a RAB, and he has brought some materials he was going to probably do under public comment or ask for some time. He may be able to give you some background from the RAB history and at least a perspective of some of the public, because I know his involvement with the civic group has brought a lot of those signatures up. So if you want to have him do an update, I guess you can entertain that, or we can just let it go to public comment.
Oh, sure. If you
I can
want
have
to
Mr.
come up
Porcelli
and-
Well,
follow
wait,
up.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is it, so this is an action item. We don't have an action item here, but is what trustee Porcelli is looking for is just our support?
Correct.
And that, so
Our recommendation and support to the township board to.
So I just move that the Groseal Airport Commerce Park Commission supports an establishment of a RAB, the Army Corps RAB, right?
Yep.
That we support that effort fully. I mean, whatever, I'm not sure what we can do to help. It's not anything that we get involved with, but
Sure.
I think that we need to publicly give that resolution of support to Joe to take it to the township board, that yes, indeed, the Commerce Park Commission supported it, they don't. So I just move that we support the establishment of the RAB and support that effort in any way we can. I'm not sure what.
Yeah. I can give a little more background quick if you want before a vote.
Let
if
me
the
get,
commission
no,
needs
let me
some.
get a support,
Okay.
and then we can open it for discussion. You've got a motion. Is there any support? Support. Support by Mr. Filarski. Under discussion. If you'd like to come up and give us a little background.
Question. So this was just brought to you today?
No.
I
The,
didn't see it on the agenda before. Did I miss it?
yeah, it was on there. Yeah, from last week.
I'm sorry.
Yep, no worries.
There was no backup information.
There was no
Yeah.
other
Just the
information.
agenda, yeah. There was nothing, there was no information, so.
Yeah, I can help you out. What's going on? You want to use the Elmo? Oh, you should be good on there. Yeah, out of the way. Yep, no, that way. Here we go. I can zoom in a little bit for us. It's on the screen here, so you can point and do what you need to do.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Bill Heil. I'm president of the Groseal Civic Association. And the reason I came here was to explain how we are concerned, or why we are concerned about this rehabilitation of the relation board.
Bill, I think you're going to get yelled at to use the microphone.
Yeah, you gotta go over to,
I can
there you go.
I'm sorry, I can stay right here.
for you a little bit.
Oh, that will be helpful. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Thank
Good.
you. The picture here, in a way, says an awful lot to me. It looks kind of simple, but there's a lot of meaning in it that I think conveys as part of the significance of why this is important. There's a building there. It's an industrial building, and it's got smokestacks, and if it's something that emits pollutants, they could either go through the air or get down into the soil and move into the water. It doesn't have to be an industrial building to do that, but there's a concept of the motion of things here. And you can have an airport or any actually formerly used defense site, and they have similar activities that go on in each of them, whether they're flying a helicopter out of it or driving a tank into it to take care of it. For example, they use the same types of cleaning chemicals in some cases, degreaser, trichloroethane. It'll work on an engine in a tank, it'll work on the wing of an aircraft, it'll work in a number of different places. And if you throw it in a bucket on the ground, it doesn't matter whether it was on a tank or on an aircraft, it's going to get into the soil. It's the same with other things like munitions. Munitions have percolate, I'm not sure I pronounced it right, it's a propellant to make it go. There's also part of solid fuel rockets. That gets around, and the munitions can be laying around. Fuels, aviation fuels, motor vehicle fuels. And what we need to understand here is that when these sites that I'm talking about were in use, it was World War II. And everybody was focused on getting the job done now or even 2 minutes ago. There's a book that I read that was about the Willow Run bomber plant with the B-24, and the goal was to build a plane every 63 minutes. Well, they succeeded in doing that, but things got set by the wayside. And what got set by the wayside, for example, was we built this dormitory for people to live in, but oh wait, we didn't have plumbing, for example, to go to we didn't have plumbing to get to a sewage plant. What are we going to do? Oh, we'll dig a hole and put a little house on it. Well, they did it outside the building. They said, wait a minute, we don't have drinking water. So they drilled a well right near the outhouse. And don't you know, the outhouse polluted the drinking water. They weren't thinking on that. They were thinking of building an aircraft every 63 minutes. On this particular site, you can go over to the Nike missiles, and there's some maps. I don't have one with me, but there was a trench, and it was used for drainage of, again, trichloroethane. But you'd have a bucket that you'd use to clean off the missile or the apparatus that raised it. You'd throw it in the trench. It would go down into the bay. Now, what happens is that when it has any of these processes that I'm describing, it gets down there into the ground. Years ago, when these were in operation, and even in the years subsequent to that when they were closed, the understandings that we have today weren't the understandings that were had then. They thought if you buried it in the ground, it would sit there. But it moves. Each circumstance on movement depends on where it's situated. If you're uphill from where it's going, that's all going to go downhill. In our situation, I want you to think for a moment, I'm talking conceptually, everybody knows what the shell on a Shell gas station looks like, right? And it's got those ribs that come out. Well, I want you to take the bottom edge of that shell thing, turn it upside down, and put it on the south edge of Grow Road, and let those lines represent the drainage that goes out here off to the left, would go east, off to the right to go west, straight ahead to go north. That's the way we drain here. You also have to be concerned about, that's hydrology, but you have to also be concerned about the quality of the soil is. I mean, the liquids don't move well through clay, but if there's some grains of sand in there, you can get them out, you get seepage. If there's other soils, it moves faster. We have a lot of limestone, and that stuff's soft and is full of holes, so it really moves well. We also have a lot of hydrology. That underground water, I don't know of a place, maybe in the country, that's as powerful as the water forces that we're dealing with. The Army Corps of Engineers measures the flow of the Detroit River and publishes a document. It's a 2-year moving average. The last one that I saw was from 2008 to 2010, and it was the average amount of water that was going by a fixed point at Fort Wayne, 1,335,000 gallons approximately. I'm close enough. A second. It's a mind-boggling number for 24 hours a day for 2 years. Since then, we've had a couple of years where the water flows were higher. Probably the average, if you took the next 2 years, would be the biggest on record. What I'm getting at is that this stuff that's coming off of these operations have things like heavy metals in them. Lead, mercury, arsenic. And that stuff just doesn't sit there. If you take anything like this, it can turn ultimately into a vapor. And what happens is that it can move and travel. And maybe some other day it gets from one side of the water to the other. It doesn't have to be water, it just has to move. And then it can cause problems. And there's one historic one that's, I think it's in northeastern North Carolina. I can't remember the name of the city. I keep wanting to say Chapel Hill, and it isn't it. It's some other name, and I'm not even sure Chapel Hill's in there. But this guy had a regular job, but he happened to like to fix circuit boards for computers. So that was his part-time job. He did it in his garage, and his house was on top of a hill. And it was spotless in there. And he used TCE to clean the board. But they had a sink there and a workbench. When he was done doing the cleaning, he pulled the plug and it ran down out of the sink, through a rubber tube, out the wall of the garage, onto the ground. Well, down below, a little bit away, was a relatively new subdivision, and everybody down there had water from a well they dug for each of their homes. They drilled down and got the water that way. Yes, a quarter mile later, that stuff got there. They had an answer for the problem. There was a fresh water supply from a community that was about 15 miles away. They just laid some pipe and connected everybody's house, and the issue was behind them. And that's good news in a way, because if you find trouble, there's people who know how to deal with these things, should you find them. But if you're a young person, and you're out playing on that soccer field, I can read this one document, but there's actually a couple of lines that hit right in the heart of it. Children have immune systems that aren't as developed as adults do. And when they're playing, they also tend to get their hands dirty and it gets on their mouth and they get it. And if they do that often enough, they can have trouble because they've ingested whatever it is, be it lead or whatever. And then they have things that happen to their immune system, that happen to their DNA. Literally, you and I, for example, could say father a child, and if we then got enough stuff in us, our DNA could change and we would father another one. We would be different, the second child would be different than the first child. And it gives us a lot of diseases that are of real concern. Now, the question then is, why am I talking about this now? Why is it important? Because we have had things going on here again and again and again. And I guess in simple language, we learned and we learn and we learn. And what seems to be necessary has proved not always sufficient. And there have been some spots that I would like to see having a second review. The one that caught my attention way back years ago was right across from my own house on the bay. I'm concerned about arsenic. There's an area called 24A. That's an AOC, an area of concern. There's a total of 25. This is 24A. Arsenic. On this one sheet, I don't have that one with me either, but these numbers on that map don't make sense. That's area 15, and in the center of it, like a hole in a donut, is 5. Okay? It literally looks like that.
I think it's an uncategorized way of how they found them, unfortunately. They just got the blind numbers, but I agree.
But those things are loaded. Chromium, lead, a lot of things. I found one, I can't even pronounce it, and I didn't know what it was. It was a small thing. It's something like perchlorine or something. It's something else. I looked it up on the computer. It's used in explosives. Now, I read it. This place has had 3 major companies investigated over the years. The first one was Foth and Van Dyke. And in that particular set of documents, I remember reading somebody frustratingly say, I was supposed to be looking for ammunition, and all I did was take a ride in a Jeep. I didn't so much as set a foot on the ground. I wasn't allowed to move anything so much as a leaf rake. But this stuff like this is what they're concerned about. And I had conversation with someone who I think would prefer to be nameless, but very much in a position to know here at one time, who was worried about perchlorate, not this other stuff, for that kind of a reason. The reason it's important that we do this RAB is that if we get another look, we have either more peace of mind or some understanding of ways where we can improve things here for people's health. The main exposure is children and older people. The immune systems begin to deteriorate. And that's the motive for wanting to do that. The government is willing to pay for this, as I best understand the directives. They'll pay for the investigation. I'm not aware of anything where we would participate. There is one thing I would suggest. If they come in with a document, I'd suggest that we have it peer-reviewed by somebody on our own. I have had some conversation with people who do that kind of work. I've had opportunity, because of what I learned, to look at things that I have seen in documents and notice that things have been adjusted over the years. If you go along the road here, and you get out toward, the athletic building, I'm not sure exactly where along there, but they ran into lead, and the lead was at, I think it was 14,600 units per unit. I never remember what it is. And the state of Michigan was having the limit at the time 7,300. It was exactly double, right down to the last dot. Well, how are we going to handle this problem? We've got a new limit. It's 15,000. You follow the math there? They raised the limit over it. There was another one down there in Area 5 I looked at, and I've not talked with anybody to verify this. I'm as a layman talking on this. But they were concerned. I was telling you how the water would flow from the north to the south, and they were looking for some chemical. And this was in the vicinity of the 3 rocket launchers. But they placed the test holes north of the rocket launchers. So the drainage that carries it was taking it away from the test holes. And there's motives for that sometimes. And I just would urge that we might be wise, if after we get an result, just to have it looked at for that reason. But I think that the main motive for me is that you care about people. You care about what they do in their lives. I had friends years ago, I don't know, I ended up with a circle of friends who were in sociology and psychology, and I was advised, and I think I can feel it, that the most painful thing somebody can suffer is the loss of a child. And if we're making decisions for the community and trying to create a place where it's comfortable to live and we can have a bright future, dealing with those things is important. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, we appreciate your comments and your support. I think you have the commission as a whole will support is supporting the RAB. And Mike, can you just summarize that? You had indicated there were so many issues that they were looking at over the years, and now it's down to 2. Is that my understanding?
Correct. Well, a minor correction. So, as Mr. Heil told you, there originally were, over the years, more were found, but 25 areas of concern, AOCs is what they call them. Throughout my time and the Commission's time here, and since the Navy has left, they have been working towards investigating, remediating if necessary, and closing out those 25 AOCs. Very slow, very long process with the federal government through the Army Corps of Engineers. They currently, to my knowledge, have 3 areas left. One is the old skeet range that is underneath the soccer football fields that the township capped years ago. Our hangar number 2 facility, and one location where a building used to be about halfway down between the park and the seaplane base off of the airport. There's one soil spot down there that needs additional testing. From the gist that I can get, the RAB stuff is kind of newer. The Army Corps started getting mandated to be offering these to residents. Generally, whenever there's any progress and there's an update, we host a open house. I know Mr. Howell's been to plenty of those with the Army Corps. Normally, I get okay. So sure. Normally, again, I work with Army Corps. We put on an open house for the public, and we give out an update. They give out an update. Their update with, normally I get informed first. The RAB is really when there's project progress or updates, the Army Corps and I will meet with this group that's kind of established through residents, and then we'll also probably do the open house. So, the Army Corps, I think from discussions with them and their viewpoint, they're in their mind close to closing out this entire base. They have 3 more, I think they think they're at the 10-yard line and closing it out, and they had called me and asked, what my thoughts were, and my comments will be always, I think that if the residents are passionate and they want to be involved, I will always be supportive of the residents in the community here. I think that's very important for them to feel comfortable and feel that the airport's part of the community. So I would never not support the residents of the community. I told the Army Corps that. I think that it's no skin off the township's back to have them involved. If anything, I think it's a benefit to making sure that the base gets cleaned up appropriately and to everyone's standards. So having them involved, I think, is a benefit. It could bring other expertise, other questions into it that I think the public want answered, and it gives them better access. There's no reason. I cannot see a reason not to do it. The only, I can tell you from the summaries that the Army Corps have provided in the past, I do believe they're moving towards closing out the old skeet range and the location in the woods back here on the airport. I do think the hangar number 2 location is going to need some sort of remediation. There's exceedances in what would be drinking water. We don't have any wells on the island, but it's still an exceedance of drinking water and has to be remediated. I don't know how they intend to do that, whether it's dig up and remove that soil or providing some sort of a system that remediates that. I don't have that answer yet. I'm not sure that they do, but from the last, again, this has been an ongoing project since 1970. The last update I've had, that seemed to be the direction that the Army Corps was moving towards. So, I think they're trying to find an answer on how do we remediate that hangar too, and what else do we need to close out the other 2 locations.
Thanks, Mike. Any other, Mr. Rathel?
Bill, can I ask you to come back up there, please?
Okay, go ahead.
Yep, you want to make a comment first, or?
Well, if you wouldn't mind.
No, go ahead.
What I'm holding here is a document that I hadn't chosen to present, but we were talking about how this stuff settles out and what goes on over time. But it says environmental contamination. The Corps needs to reassess its determinations that many former defense sites do not need cleanup. Now, that document is by our current standards, a bit old. This is 2002, and work has gone on here since then. But if you take a look, I mean, I have documents that I've dug up on Wordsmith Air Force Base, K.I. Sawyer, Schilling over in Salina, Kansas, Dayton, Ohio. Begins with a W. That doesn't matter. I just, my memory quit on me. All of these sites have been going through repeated investigations like ours. And it just seems to me that we learn more. We learn that even less the exposure still is significant. We just have to deal with it. And so it's in that spirit I'm looking at this and what we're talking about.
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to make one note comment. It's important that everyone knows that with the Army Corps and Mike in these meetings, Mike is only there as a host. He's not making decisions. We're not making any decisions.
Right.
This is nothing to do with the Commerce Park Commission, nothing to do with Mike's office. So that's an important point. But Bill, I got to thank you. And you made an interesting comment of like, why now, or why did I bring this here now? And it was because we learn all the time, right? And if there's anything that anybody that's been paying attention to anything on this island is, nobody really cares about us except us. They don't. We have to take it upon ourselves to defend and fight for Groseal. We learned it with the bridge. The bridge was great. The inspections were going on. We trusted Wayne County. We trusted everybody. And you know what? Here we are over a year. The bridge is closed. And we certainly have an uncertain future. I think probably we know more, right? So what you guys are doing, and everybody knows politically you and I don't always agree. Okay. And
We still smile at each other.
But what you guys are doing at that Groseal Civic Group, okay, you're getting dirty. You're going down. You're getting into the mud. You're looking at things. You're digging up things. And you're making suggestions. And the suggestions are for like the bridge. Thank you, County, for doing this, but we should have our own engineer to go over and make sure that we are fighting for ourselves. How do you argue with that? This Army Corps, they have 25 areas. They're going to close them out. They got 2. Great, we close them out. But I can tell you that I'm pretty knowledgeable about this airport for the last 25 years. I couldn't tell you where those sites are. I couldn't tell you if it was downhill or up here where they drilled the hole. I couldn't tell you what was there, what you just showed me. Okay? I guess, like everybody, well, the Army Corps is just checking them off. They're getting rid of them. They're getting, oh, good, man, we don't have any more. Does that mean that?
There's good people there, but there's a grain of that in there too.
And maybe,
sometimes.
and you said something else. If it's nothing more than our peace of mind, right?
Right.
We're not going after a witch hunt. We're not going to go after somebody's job or try to find somebody that we can blame for anything. We'll take it. I'll take it that they've done a great job, and all this stuff is true. They got rid of all of them except these 3. They're going to get rid of 2 out there by the soccer fields. Is gone. This one's gone. We got 1 more. We may have to. I'll take them for their word. But I tell you what, I have a very rare blood cancer called multiple myeloma. Okay? There is no evidence of where it comes from outside of they strongly feel it's environmental. okay? I never heard of it, and certainly never knew anyone in Groseal that had it until I have it. And now I know a lot of people that have it, and a lot of cancers that Groseal residents suffer from, okay?
It's a grain of truth in that.
We, as residents, we can disagree politically who you want to sit here at this chair leading the board meetings, okay? But we have to agree that our residents have to care enough about our environment on this island that we can all work together in the same goal of making sure that we're all safe. Thank you for doing this. I'll support you.
Thank you.
You get the residents that care, not the ones that just want to create political strife, okay? Get the ones that care and want to learn, all right? And I'll sit back here saying thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Athel, supported by Mr. Filarski, to support and recommend that the Army Corps RAB be established. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Item number 8, our discussion items, Island Athletics exterior paint quote. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring this up as, through the tenant request, a brief discussion item. If you recall, when we approved the lease for Island Athletics, we approved a budget up to $20,000 to pay for materials to upgrade the facility. I think most of the commission, or I believe all of the commission, has been in that facility and seen some of the upgrades that have been done. All new ceiling tiles, all new floor in the lobby. We're currently wrapping up renovating tile and renovating the women's locker room, and are going to do some minor renovations to the men's. With all that being done, we've expensed $13,000 of that budget. I included some of the expenses. You'll see that those don't perfectly add up to 13. There's still a few more coming that I know are in the pipeline that I accounted for. The tenant requested that we consider, she went out on her own, both of them went out on their own and got some quotations for painting the exterior of the facility. They wanted to ask the commission if they are willing to participate in that. I think I can pose the question to the commission. I mean, we have a couple options. If we wanted to do that, we could offer to expense the remainder of that $7,000 towards that project. We could offer to pay for, expense that $7,000 and cover the difference if we wanted to, or we could save the remaining $7,000 for the parking lot improvement that we have budgeted and the future roof capital expense that we're going to have. So it's kind of something I wanted to bring up and see what the commission's appetite for that was, and if we had any thoughts.
I'll open that up for discussion.
All right, guys, come on, man. This is like an important one.
I guess I'll comment too. I can add that the quotes varied quite a bit in range. I mean, you can see the lowest is $14,000, the highest is $35,000. The tenants had requested that only 3 sides of the building be painted. So the front and the 2 sides. Whether we want to expense the back that faces the airport side, I guess we can also discuss. So these quotes are for just 3 sides of the facility, but includes a extensive power wash, prep, and the lift to do that. I do not have experience with any of these companies except for Endurance Painting. That's one I recommended. It's about mid-level, $21,000. That is the tenant that did a fantastic job for us on the interior of Building 63 on our units that we built out there. And we had a ceiling that was coated in grease that needed to be cleaned and prepped in a very specific and special way. So I'm comfortable with that contractor. I'm not familiar with any of the other ones. That's something that I suppose we could bid, but the tenant got these on their own and requested that we review it and discuss.
So really, Mike, the issue before us is, do we want to support the tenant and use that remaining $7,000 for the painting of the 3 sides of the exterior of the building?
Correct.
That's really
Yep.
the issue before us.
Correct. It's a non-budgeted item. There's a remainder in the budget. The tenant would like to see, thought the improvement would add a very nice touch to the exterior of the facility. I don't disagree with that. I think the building is in need of a coat of paint. But that's the question is, to what extent do we want to go to support that project?
Mr. Chair. So this
Mr. Mans.
obviously the parking lot's a disaster, right?
Correct.
In my opinion, that needs to be done first, and I totally agree. I mean, that building needs some TLC. We talked about that for years. But I think, with that parking lot being like it is, you want to tackle that first, or?
Correct. The parking lot's budgeted, and the engineer, I'm waiting for to design and put the bid specs together. The engineer expressed to me a lot of concerns right now with the pricing, with the bridge down and material costs being significantly high. I told him I wanted to proceed with that, so that was some of the delay was, what those costs were going to look like. The one opportunity we have, we've budgeted a little over $40,000 to do that. That's in our budget, and we have funds allocated to do that. The one other opportunity that I'm exploring there is DPW. I don't know if it's just DPW or through Wayne County, but they're going to be repaving a few roads on the island. So if all that equipment is there, I'm going to try to see if there's an opportunity to tie in and extend that contract for cost savings. I'm looking into that right now as well.
So there was money budgeted for the 20,000
This would be
support
above and beyond
plus
our
the parking lot.
budgeted items.
That by way of a motion?
Because I haven't talked yet.
Go ahead, Mr. Rayful.
So, Mike, this sounds a little different than how I have it. I have an understanding. The parking lot's done, approved. It would have been done if Mike would have acted sooner on it. Right.
Sure.
So the parking
The
lot.
parking lot's not done and approved. This group needs to approve it, but we need to go out for bids to have those numbers to decide if it's within our budget or not. If the numbers, if we budgeted $40,000 and the bids come in at $100,000, I'm probably going to recommend we wait till the bridge reopens to do that parking lot and do some more temporary
Let's
stuff.
hope that doesn't happen. So we have budget money for that. We also budgeted, or we approved, $20,000 of expense within the building for her to,
For materials, correct.
and then they were going to get the labor, right?
Correct.
So we have $7,000 of that left.
Correct.
Okay.
7,000 of the 20 remaining, correct?
Okay. So my understanding is that they didn't want to put any money into painting the building, that we would take the $7,000 that we already have, use that, and then come up with more money to paint the building.
I think that's what the tenant would probably like to see, but the discussion amongst the board is, what do we want to offer? Do we want to just offer the 7,000 to the tenant and have them make up the difference? We can offer that, or do we want to fund the whole project and use that last $7,000 to do the project?
I didn't quite hear you say that last part, that was an option. So
Correct.
my feeling is that we have the money allocated for the parking lot, let's do that. We had $20,000 to use for supplies, materials inside the building when something happens, and we've been using that. And I think that money needs to stay allocated for that. Because if something happens inside the building that may need to be repaired, that incident could prevent activity happening in the building, right? And that is something that could come up as a surprise. And if we still have that money for them to use, we have a better chance of fixing whatever that is internally, like we have been doing for the $13,000 that we've already spent. So I don't want to use it for painting. And I don't want to spend money any more than that or allocate any money now for painting altogether. Yes, it would look really nice if it was painted. It would be awesome. However, we're talking about, we don't know how much money that we're going to need this year for 1735. Those are costs that we don't know about. Ron is working on a landscape plan, right? And you met with the landscaper, all right? So we're trying to figure out some cost over there of what we can do. So there are things that we have in mind that we really need, that we need to be prepared for. Painting the building, to me, is not one of them this year. If they want to paint the building and they think that's going to create a better environment to bring people in, and okay, then paint the building. We don't have any problem with you doing that. We said we'd give you 20 grand for materials. We said that we'd spend the 40 grand to fix the parking lot. And now, not only that, what isn't budgeted anywhere is the amount of time that you spend doing this. 2 hours, you said, you had the court cleaned up, you had it swept up, you had the fans and everything, from water that came in. Well, the building didn't get any worse over the years and all of a sudden water's coming in. The center's always dealt with these things. It's an old building. So that's where I'm at. But, you know, it's a discussion item, right? So if somebody, you know, wants to do something else.
Mike, do you know, are they done with the interior improvements?
That was the discussion I had, maybe a few small things, but the bulk, yes. And the way I read that action item was for their cosmetic upgrades and some obviously mechanical to make those cosmetic upgrades. So, you know, whether we replace a toilet, whatever that is. The drainage work that came out of the southeast side of that building at $4,000 or $5,000, I did not take out of that because that's not the upgrades to the facility that we negotiated.
Yeah.
So what I had indicated to the tenant is, look, my understanding is if we do allocate the $7,000 there, we're done. I'm not going to give you additional funds to put a floor in the men's bathroom. I'm not going to give you
Or a door going into, or a door going into the men's locker room on that side, which they need.
Sure.
So they have the money to buy those materials and do those improvements that they want right now with that $7 grand. We put it towards paint, and they have to come up with the other stuff, the things internally that they want to do or may have to do. There's no money whatsoever. But I can guarantee you what would happen, though, in that case, they'll call you up and say, hey, anything you could do.
And they've indicated that they're going to pay whatever the difference is for the paint.
No. No, like I said, I think their initial request was that we use the $7,000 remainder and
Pay the rest.
And give them more.
and give them more of the difference. But I think they were also open to the discussion of, would you let us at least use the 7 for paint?
Yeah.
You know,
I personally would support giving them the 7,000 for the paint if they're going to pay the rest. I mean, if we can leverage our 7 and their 7 or whatever more it cost, I think that's money well spent. So that's my opinion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Tenova.
I agree. We committed to the money, so if they want to use it for the 7,000 towards paint, that's fine. But looking through these quotes, I noticed 2 of them showed Sherwin-Williams products.
Mm-hmm.
I just suggest that we get apples to apples quotes, what type of paint being used by all of them.
sure. Yep. A lot of times they'll send a representative out and have a look at the building and kind of make a recommendation on that paint supply. But I agree. I think an engineer or a paint specialist can make a recommendation on what type of product we're looking for.
Do you have any idea when the last time we put any exterior maintenance on that building?
We replace siding frequently. The type of siding that's on there is an older style and tends to blow off a little bit here and there, and we patch it. So that's why you see some kind of discoloration. We can't always get an exact match on the siding. You know, we can, 20 years of sun fade, I can't match perfectly, but
I think there was caulking.
Yeah,
some other
caulk.
things that, you know,
Correct.
Honestly, our job is to still maintain these buildings.
correct.
That's part of the landlord's responsibility. But, so, I'm good.
With what I said or what Ron said?
Not you. The other 4, that's everybody else except you.
Is that?
It was everybody else.
Yeah, I was right. It's going to be one of those 6-to-1 votes again.
Is there any other comments from Mr. Hornby?
Yeah, I guess I whatever way we go, when we want to look at painting all 4 sides, and, you know, Chris kind of touched on age, and you power wash and clean, maybe you got caulk, maybe you got some deterioration. I mean, it just seemed like it would make sense to do all at once and requote.
I don't know if you want to put the stipulation on that or not.
Having to rip a roof out in a year and then we spend all this money on painting. So, I mean, that's certainly a concern, but I don't know how you get around that.
I do have one question though, Mike, seriously. If the commission votes to use the $7 grand, we say, listen, you have a $7 grand credit from us to do that, and they come up with the rest and they go, we will do that. Who will be in charge of the project?
It's gonna have to be kind of a team effort at that point.
You know, because I mean,
We
I
both
don't know
have
that-
skin in the game. I mean, I think I would like to sign off on whatever project they have.
to make sure it's done right and
Right.
it's the right paint, like Jacob said, and, you
Yep.
know,
Well, and we're gonna have to get proof of their expenditures, what they've spent on it too.
Absolutely.
So you see receipts and things like that.
and then, you know, as far as, I guess this is not a crazy concern, but the color, right? Who picks out the color?
We own the facility. I think we would get to mandate the color.
We'd have to sign off on it.
Again, a team effort, but ultimately it's our decision. It's our facility. Pink.
No, but, I don't want something that, you know, they paint and then somebody drives down there and is like, that thing is hideous looking, you know?
I can guarantee you someone is gonna say that. Regardless of how pretty it is, someone will say that. I can guarantee that. I can guarantee that. Call the police on that. You know someone's not gonna like it.
Do you have a comment?
When you mentioned Sherwin-Williams, a little light went on in my head. Most of my life, I insured commercial businesses, and on more than one occasion, I can remember that they were very enthusiastic about a firm named Stathakis for commercial painting. It happened I remembered the name, and I've got a pole barn that's 40-something by 50-something, and it's steel. They're still in business, and by God, they're on Allen Road on the west side, just south of King. But they used Sherwin-Williams, and because they were concerned about the service, they got some guy that Sherwin-Williams has on the payroll.
Yep.
Come out and look at my place, and they blended the stuff to sit on it. It's got a lifetime guarantee, and I had a good price. But when you had mentioned Sherwin-Williams, I don't know if I'd have thought of that, but it's
That's a
So the gentleman running the cable came out because no one out there watching the meeting or will watch it recorded heard what you said, but let me just kind of summarize. What Bill said was, I support John in this.
Your hearing's going bad, John.
So Bill, if that's not the official word that you wanted to have out there, you better come up to the microphone next time you talk, so.
They did, who was the guy that had the glass plant, he owned the Detroit Pistons up in Auburn?
Bill Davidson.
Bill Davidson's glass plant, these guys painted it. They can do
All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
Well, someone needs to make a
Yeah.
motion. So I won't because you know mine, so I'll let someone else make it. Hearing none, I'll make the motion. Okay.
I'll support.
You're gonna love this motion then. I make a motion that we allocate the remaining $7,000 that we have for improvements to that building to give to the tenant to use to paint the exterior building based upon the approval of the process, quality of paint, et cetera, approval from Mike, and then also the color approved by this commission.
Is there support?
Support, sounds reasonable.
Support by Mr. Filarski. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Rathel, supported by Mr. Filarski. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no.
Can I vote no against my own motion?
No.
Okay, I'll
That's
vote.
Robert's Rules of Order doesn't allow you to do that. Motion carries. Item number 9 is our subcommittee reports, the AAC update.
No, I think Chairman Glovis was trying to make it tonight, but obviously he has not, wasn't able to. I don't know if Mr. Rigg has anything further to add from our 1735 discussion. You all good?
I'm just asking that, I'm in accordance with John. How the hell did that happen?
I know everyone at home can't hear Carl, but basically what he said was, I support John.
So we'll put that on the agenda next for the next meeting. Item number 10 is the chairman's report. I have no report tonight. Number 11 is public comment. Any public comment?
We've exhausted Bill.
We've been very generous today.
Hearing none, our item number 12 is, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Mann, supported by Mr. Tenova to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
Good
Motion
job,
carries.
guys. You're awesome.
Good being back.
It's good being